Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. The speakers have asked if everybody could please move to the front so we're all kind of together as a group here. So let's take 30 seconds to lift ourselves and move forward. They want to feel special. And for speakers of this caliber, what wouldn't you do for them? So we'll all come in and come together. Good job. Okay, I was worried you guys weren't going to do it. Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Laura Watkins. I am the director of the Startups program at Rackspace, and I will be the session chair for this room for the rest of this afternoon. We are very pleased to introduce our next set of speakers. They're going to be discussing the corporate world and open source and how they work together in their talk, Why Can't We Be Friends? So let's all give a huge round of applause to Lynn Root and Noa Resare.
Thank you, Laura. All right, let's get this started. All right, so yes, I'm Lynn Root, as Laura just said. I am a site reliability engineer for Spotify. Some folks might think I still live in San Francisco, but no, a couple months ago I live in New York now. More of an East Coaster, I'm sorry. But I'm also one of the global leaders of PyLadies, which if you don't know yet, it's a global mentorship group for women and friends in the Python community. As of this morning, I retired as a vice chair of the Python Software Foundation Board of Directors, so that's one less thing on my plate. And when I'm not busy trying to keep Spotify's service up and running, I help a lot of folks within the company to release our software as free software with the help of my colleague here, Noah.
Yeah. I am Noa Resare. I've been in operations at Spotify for the first 2 years of my 6-year career in the company. Since then, I moved into backend engineering, done various things, and before that, I did startups and lots of things since the turn of the millennium or something. And at Spotify, I worked on many different technical problems, but also structural problems, or challenges with regards to sort of setting company culture and getting Spotify to be a better free software community member.
Awesome. So Noah and I, we are the engineering part of Spotify's free and open source software board, which is a formal committee-like group that sort of organically came about from developers' genuine passions about FOSS. And the FOSS board also has a patent engineer, coincidentally a former developer at Oracle, and also a staff lawyer to help us adhere to software obligations and to protect the company and other cover your ass kind of things. So just so that we're all on the same page, Spotify builds a service for sale. We are not in the business of maintaining open source software. Releasing and maintaining and contributing to FOSS is not what makes us money. And I think many people in the audience are in similar circumstances. Not a lot of us work for Red Hat or Docker or Puppet Labs. But I hope that all of us are here because we all share the same passion about free software. Otherwise, I'm not sure why you're in this room. Maybe we can convince you to be passionate. But Noah and I are giving this talk from the point of view of how to be good citizens, as we are first and foremost open source developers who have tried and worked really hard to get our employer to give back to our community. So back in November, Ian Cordasco, a good friend of mine, I hope he would say the same, and core developer of many popular Python packages and libraries, including Requests and Flake8, he wrote a blog post about how corporations and open source software do not mix. I encourage everyone here to read it if you haven't, and there's a link at the end of our talk. But in his post, Ian recounts times where users of his projects, mainly big companies and even the US government, overload him to fix particular bugs. They ping him relentlessly on IRC, creating duplicate issues, emailing him, anything to get his attention to prioritize their concerns. Ian also argues that when companies do contribute, it's not often in the best interest of the community. It might not be enough or just might be completely misguided. So his post really affected me, made me quite sad, because for a lot of what he wrote, it's very true, and he's very right. In his post, he makes a lot of moral arguments about why companies should give back to open source. But to have his poor experiences brought to light, some of which I have encountered myself, it really angered me. And I don't know about you, but I tend to get proactive when I'm angry. So as huge FOSS champions within Spotify, our talk takes more of a pragmatic approach. So what exactly is the issue here? In essence, it's the tragedy of the commons. It's an economic theory where individual users, and in this case companies, are acting independently and rationally according to their own self-interests, contrary to the common good of all users, which is here the open source community. By depleting that resource, which would be free software and the time and energy it takes to work on free software. It's used to describe problems related to sustainability, like human overpopulation, environmental issues, farming, et cetera. And it seems to be a pretty apt theory when describing corporations using open source. So first, let's assume that companies use or want to use free and open source software, and they have a general understanding that it benefits them to do so. As Ian points out in his post, companies have a propensity not to give back from the community from which they took. Perhaps they do feel some guilt, or in general have an understanding that they should give back. But let's assume that there's no real action or just not enough. Part of the problem is this expectation on the FOSS community itself. Free software work is often not paid for, but these projects are expected to be maintained. Bugs are expected to be addressed, development continued on, questions and issues answered within reason. And free software users generally recognize that this is an unrealistic expectation, right? Even if we don't give back. Certainly a lot of respect and goodwill is earned by these software maintainers and contributors. Therefore, it's pretty reasonable for these maintainers to try and cash in on this goodwill and to ask the community for financial assistance. Maybe you've contributed to a Kickstarter or a Patreon or some related service to help some fundraising for future development. But one can only really cash in on their goodwill once or twice. So essentially, how many Kickstarters can one do before donor fatigue sets in? And since all these donations are coming from individuals, it's not really a sustainable, livable salary. So it's a tragedy of the commons. Companies see the ability to use open source software as a nearly complete net positive. And it's free to use. You get free support, supposedly. But they do not apprehend or consider the negatives. While a single one-sided user of an open source library might not have a large effect on the project itself, it definitely adds up. So Garrett Hardin, the author of Tragedy of the Commons, said, "Ruin is a destination towards which all men rush, each pursuing his own best interests in a society that believes in the freedom of the commons. Freedom in commons brings ruin to us all."
So pretty sad stuff. And the question is this a done deal? Is it the only way it can be? It's a tragedy, it will happen. I would say that there's a lot of things pointing towards this being sort of just the typical tragedy of the commons. And corporations are acting out of rational self-interest. But I think that the relevant question is, what is self-interest? And if we can nudge the understanding of what self-interest is for these corporations, I think it's possible to get into a situation where corporations do more long-term, more sort of well-thought-out contributions and stuff like that. Self-interest can be very narrow, but it can also be understood as a very broad concept. And I think it's important to get into a situation where we don't require altruism on behalf of the corporations to get a model that works. We can try to guilt corporations into do nice things, but long term, that might work once or twice, but long term, I think that it's really important to try to get these companies and try to get these organizations to understand what is in their own best self-interest. And I think that there are some good examples of where their company's best self-interest would be to do more and contribute more. I think that the most clear-cut example would be the cost of bugs. There was this scare a while back, or like, scare might not be the right title even, heartbleed bugs showed up, and everyone woke up to the conclusion, background noise? Everyone woke up to the conclusion that OpenSSL that everyone depends on was maintained by one guy, and not even full time. Fortunately, we found a structure to fix that, and the Open Infrastructure or Core Infrastructure Initiative from the Linux Foundation has founded development of some really important building blocks and some really important pieces of technology that we all use, like SSH, NTP, and OpenSSL. But these costs are very real, even for smaller organizations that are not Facebook or Cisco or Amazon or the people that fund these initiatives. And I think that realizing this puts the spotlight on the fact that it's in our own self-interest and in the self-interest of these organizations to do more. There's also the cost of lack of usability. Spending a lot of time trying to do things and spending a lot of time trying to get your software to work all right, that is cost. That is developer cost, it's operations cost. So what can we do about it? Some practical things I would like to mention from our experience at Spotify is that a really good first step is to connect with others in the organization. There are a lot of people, software engineers, that are interested in free software. And if we sort of organize, and it can be really easy, just set up an email list, have a Slack channel if you use Slack, or IRC if you're someone that I like. We just switched from IRC to Slack at Spotify. It's frustrating, I'm sorry. And look into what kind of barriers are there. Are there free software contributions we would like to do upstream that we're blocked from doing? Are there projects that we would like to release that we can't release because of policy reasons or other sort of silly reasons? And sort of make a little list of the things that are blocking us. And I think that the next step typically would be to become friends with legal. So at Spotify, we have, when we started out, when I started at Spotify, we were about 100 people, and we had a good idea about how to change the world of streaming music. But it turns out that one large part of that is to make deals with large record labels and other rights holders. So we had a large organization's sort of legal department, even though we were kind of a small organization. And these people had clear ideas about how to deal with intellectual property, which is keep everything to yourself as much as possible. Giving things away is sort of the way to put the company at risk. And they didn't really see the benefits. So I wanted to contribute to Apache Cloud Stack. We have written some things we needed to be able to use Cloud Stack for ourselves, and it took 2 months to get the company to sign the contributor license agreement for the Apache project to be able to contribute this, and like a handful of meetings, and it was so frustrating. And my conclusion from that was that we need to spend time on this. We need to focus on this. Another thing that you can do is to look for financial contributions. That's also no picnic to do, as most developers are interested in sort of focusing on writing code and stuff like that. And when you need to get financial contributions made, then you need to sort of write documents instead and go to meetings and have discussions and prioritize things and those kinds of things. But it's a meaningful thing to do, and it's an easy way to get projects to prioritize the important stuff. A little bit of a meta point is giving presentations and talking about what you're doing internally and externally is a really good way to get things moving as well. I think that it's important also to put the focus on the problems that Ian brought up in his blog post, which is essentially that if you do bad contributions, it's almost worse than doing good contributions. And high-quality maintenance in projects trumps new features. It's easy to focus on features, but what value does a new feature have compared to actually having high-quality maintenance and bugs getting fixed and security working well? I think you should consider the existing community members and try to get your company to think long-term.
All right, so we've convinced you, maybe helped you think of some pragmatic approaches to give back to the community. But sometimes you need arguments more founded in business incentives to help convince your manager or your company to do the right thing, right? So in terms of convincing your employer why they should give back, we found 3 impactful themes of arguments. First one could be seen as a behavioral economics, or with a more grim tone, social engineering. With the likelihood of having your issues or bugs fixed is certainly higher when you work with the community by providing better bug reports, spending time on patches, helping with better documentation, basically various types of contributions back to the project itself. I know that I am far more likely and interested in helping out users of my projects when I am already familiar with working with them. You can also influence the community with what you open source as a company. For instance, Spotify released a little while ago Dage Virtual Env, which is a tool to combine Debian packaging with Python's self-contained virtual envs, because we found it difficult to manage Python dependencies when packaging for Debian. So with the community adopting such a tool, we were able to affect how the Python community develops for Debian, and with cyclical effects, it helped us and ease our packaging problem. So another incentive to invest in the FOSS community is for engineering recruitment. There are 2 reasons why Spotify was on my short list for companies to join. The first one was their genuine interest in diversity efforts and supporting PyLadies. And the second one was actually seeing a talk at EuroPython a few years ago about Spotify's use of Zookeeper and its Python wrapper Kazoo for managing its content. So from my point of view, I found these 2 significant ways that Spotify gave back to the community by giving back, getting itself involved in diversity and talking about how they were approaching certain technical problems. So it's far easier to sell a company as a tech employer if it exists in the open. And this includes talking about what you're doing, writing blog posts, sponsoring community initiatives, and open sourcing your own in-house built software, because we all have that. We all build our own, right? Folks that you tend to want to hire will put a lot of importance on a company's involvement in the FOSS community. So being able to peek inside the engineering mindset of a potential employer is a significant influence on deciding what team to join.
You could focus on this works only if you are good. So if you have bad engineering, then it doesn't work.
This also extends the alumni effect. So say, for instance, in one job, you worked with some projects that use Django or Twisted or what have you, and you take that knowledge wherever you go. So if a company uses well-established open source tools, languages, projects, whatever, like Twisted or Django, they'll spend less time training and onboarding you and other new hires. So the third argument is the ability for a company to manage its vendors via the open source, the software that it open sources. So at Spotify, I actually road manage an initiative to release and develop in the open by default all the tools, drivers, wrappers, anything and everything when using and interacting with the Google Cloud platform. So back in February, we announced that we're moving away from bare metal to Google Cloud. And certainly there's a recognized inherent risk when moving to a single provider for one's infrastructure. Google can essentially take advantage of us by being in such a position and use it against us by increasing pricing, decreasing customer support, not prioritizing certain features, or as Reddit would speculate, just kind of take down our service entirely. But one way to mitigate this risk is to position ourselves as a strategic partner, very similar to Netflix's successful relationship with Amazon. And we can do that by essentially being the lighthouse of the Google Cloud community and creating and leveraging mindshare. So now, we generally do not think that Google is out to get us. But with us cultivating the community around us, it allows Spotify to have a bigger voice at the table with them more likely to listen. So there are some examples to learn from when looking at initiatives for companies to use and to contribute back to open source. A pretty poignant example of working against the issues of vendor lock-in is the city of Munich. And they moved away from Microsoft-based work setup to an all open source solution setup. Back in 2006, Microsoft saw themselves becoming more and more entrenched with the Microsoft ecosystem. Windows NT support was approaching its end of life, and the city had about 14,000 employee computers to worry about. And so the road manager of this migration project had said, we saw from the start that if you're only relying on one contributor to supply your operating system, your Office system, and your infrastructure, you're stuck with it. You have to do what your contributor tells you to. If they say there's no longer support for your Office version, you have to buy and implement a new one. You're no longer able to make these kinds of decisions by yourself. So upon completion in 2013, the city reported that in addition to gaining freedom in software decisions and increased security, it also saved nearly $16 million from the migration. Interesting enough, a decade after Munich's decision to migrate away from Microsoft to Linux, we've seen Microsoft itself becoming more and more friendly with the open source community. Some folks might remember that in 2001, Steve Ballmer referred to Linux being a cancer. And in an interview back in 2005, Bill Gates made a comment suggesting that open source developers were communists. But the company has significantly shifted in the past few years with the open sourcing of the .NET framework, Visual Studio Code, TypeScript, and just recently adding native support for Bash. So to open the gates, pun intended, of their, sorry. Thank you. So to open the gates of their software to the FOSS community, while some efforts might be a thinly veiled guise of a bottom line tactic like pairing with Red Hat and Azure, it seems to be a huge shift in their cultural thinking and is essentially a way to innovate for themselves and for their customers.
So, in conclusion, I think that there is a lot of hope. And of course there are problems. But I think that it is definitely possible to nudge corporations in a direction where we do more open source contribution and better, higher quality open source contributions. And I think that since the FOSS community has potential allies in every company that employ developers, it's possible to sort of, if we learn from each other a little bit and talk about the problems we run into and their solutions, we can actually sort of take small steps. And I think that one thing that software development has sort of shifted into in the 20 years that I've been doing software development is that if you release early and often and fix a little bit here and there, you can do amazing things after a while. So the fixes we do to our internal processes and the fixes we do to our company cultures, they stack up on top of each other. And hopefully we will have a much better situation in the future. So that was
it. Thank you.
our talk.
So,
And we're happy to...
yeah, let's take questions.
Yeah.
We got like maybe 7 minutes because I think we finished a little early.
Did you have any specific experiences with the GPL?
Yeah, we have specific experiences with the GPL. We ship software, and we have legal obligations as a company to not reveal some of their inner workings with regards to how we protect music and stuff like that, which means that we cannot really use GPL in anything that touches the software we release. That said, we can still use free software or GPL or any copylefted software in our backend systems. So it's something that we need to be very careful about, and it's something that we really sort of take seriously, the impact it would have to have a copyleft triggering event in our sort of by including some strong copyleft software such as GPL into the clients we release. So it's definitely something we have experience with thinking about, and so far we haven't really sort of had any copyleft software in the client. But we do release things under GPL if the engineer at Spotify is interested and had good reasons to release it, such as, for example, some software is released into an ecosystem where a lot of people use GPL. Otherwise, we try to default to the Apache license because it's very common in the various sort of ecosystems that we use. And we want our software to be as easy as possible to approach.
Some people, specifically Richard Stallman, make a very clear distinction between free software and open source software. So which one do you think is more influential to a company? Like, which arguments do you think are better?
I think you have stronger opinions about this.
Yeah, I'm a fan of free software as a term. I think that it's a moral thing. I think that it's about freedom. It's not about the convenience of having source code access. And I'm happy to consider myself a free software advocate and a free software. My title is Free Software Ombudsman inside Spotify, trying to nudge the corporation. That said, people talk about open source all the time, and I'm happy to be understood. So I use them somewhat interchangeably, but I think that the intellectual heritage from the Free Software Foundation and Richard Stallman is a really valuable one, and I'm really happy to endorse that whenever I have the opportunity.
Do you think companies do they value free software, or do they value just being able to have open software?
I think that some companies might be scared of free software, but I think that's an unfounded feeling. And I would hope that we as engineers and we as free software advocates would be more brave and push the freedom aspect a little bit more with regards to trying to nudge corporations.
Thank you.
Hey, so I'm just curious how you guys think we can start getting businesses to kind of give back to projects that they didn't publish, so things like Nginx or configuration management tools. How do we give back to those communities and get people interested in doing that?
So how to give back to projects that they don't manage but they use?
Yeah, so anything that they might use that helps them turn a profit, right? So any kind of thing you're using on your front end or back end, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's various ways. I guess the easiest way is to write a check, I guess. And I'm happy to announce that actually Spotify is donating to the PSF. Like we just confirmed a couple weeks ago. So I'm like, finally, yes. But what you could do, and besides like financial contributions, is simply writing good bug reports to help answer like mailing list questions, to give good documentation like fixes, and kind of just be involved in the community and giving patches and whatnot. Just essentially what you would do as an engineer with projects that you use. So it's as simple as that.
First, thank you both for the presentation. It's great. This is a very close to my heart sort of subject. I've been a long-time FOSS advocate. To sort of piggyback on the last question, and then that's an answer though. I'll start with the question I actually have, which is there a BOF or an open space for talking more about this? Because I work at a company that cares deeply about FOSS, and I would love to be part of the conversation and bring some experience to bear there. And then to answer the Nginx and configuration stuff, another way that companies can help big time is by sharing the legal language that their contracts include so that their employees can actually participate in open source projects. That is something that, as a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, some of our students were able to get exceptions to their contracts and their employment agreements, and we got the employers to agree that they could share that with the other students so that when they got hired during negotiation, they could say, yes, these are the projects that I participate in, here are the things I can continue to participate with. So legal language and contract language is a very awesome way to contribute to communities of open source and help. So is there a BOF? Can we continue this conversation?
Yeah, so, okay. So unfortunately, Noah and I have to leave tomorrow morning to go to Stockholm. But if you want to take on that task, I encourage you to. And maybe Ian, the blog post writer himself, will attend, or maybe he will lead one. But yeah, I think that this conversation should continue, and I hope that you do.
So one person in particular, Mike Perham, has written Sidekick. It's a Ruby library for doing, it's kind of like Celery, but for Ruby. What they do is they use a GPL class license, and then they sell licenses to corporations. They claim to have had a lot of success, but do you think that would be successful to kind of reimburse developers for libraries? Have like a dual license kind of mode? So like use a stricter license, but also allow.
Yeah, I think that it might be successful. It's a little bit tricky to understand the business model, and there is this expectation that it's going to be free for all and very, very sort of easy to approach. So it is a bit of a challenge from like how to explain your business model and explain how you set this up. I think that we should try to find patterns and find strategies that work with things being like with permissive licenses, and those hacks or those not hack in a bad way, but those strategies to find a business model that makes sense long term, they might work, but I would like to see a world where they're not needed.
All right, sorry, we just got the stop sign, but thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.